How would I grade Maikel Garcia's 2024 season? I'll tell you in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. It has been a little bit of a time off for me over the last couple of days. I was in San Francisco over the weekend, didn't get back till late last night, so I did not have the ability to do the episode on Monday. Usually we give you the 5 episodes per week per usual. Wasn't able to do it last night. I know this one's a little bit later tonight as well. I had to do a show over at 810. I do every single week with Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride. Doing a little bit of a Chiefs breakdown now that it's full swing into football and baseball season has ended. I do take on some responsibilities there at work. So if I do have some later episodes, that's why. I haven't determined just yet if I will be doing an extra episode this week. Probably depends on my weekend schedule. But I will definitely be letting everybody know within the coming days if we plan to do another episode this week to make up for not having one on Monday. But I am excited for the next couple of weeks of every once in a while putting together an episode like this, which will be grading out a lot of the players in their 2024 season. And I think more specifically would be players that I expect to be back next year and expect to have a pretty big role. I'm not going to be doing grades for Garrett Hampson or for Adam Frazier or for Will Smith because I don't believe those guys are going to be on the 2025 Kansas City Royals. So the first one I wanted to do was this team's leadoff hitter for the majority of the year, and that's Maikel Garcia. Going into 2024, I think I was higher on Maikel Garcia than most. I really thought that the advanced data, the player profile was going to translate well in the 2024. I thought he had a tremendous offseason. You weren't really seeing him bulk up a little bit, and I know for some people out there, because he was playing third base, that was a concern of theirs where you can't be, $170 and be a light hitting third baseman. Not in today's game. You got to have some pop over at third base. And as good as he was defensively, that lighter part of his offensive play style was going to rear its ugly head from time to time. And when you have the power, you can mask that. I think Michael Massey's done that tremendously at second base, but you expect your second baseman to be a light hitting player. But Michael Massey can make up at times for some of those stretches by running into one every once in a while. And lo and behold, the first at-bat that Maikel Garcia has on the year was a home run off Pablo Lopez. I was, upper deck, left field line, so I'm tracking that ball the entire way. And everything I had hoped for leading into the season was kind of coming into fruition very early on. I mean, a couple pitches into the Royals season. And then he had a home run in Baltimore, and it was to the opposite field. And at that point, I'm really starting to think, man, you're looking at a guy that can run into 15 to 20 home runs. He's got elite defense over at third base. He's your leadoff hitter. You love everything about what Maikel Garcia can bring. But those 2 home runs might have been the worst thing for Maikel Garcia because when he started to slump, he went away from what he did well. I've always believed, and kind of in the same realm with MJ Melendez, when they're at their best, Maikel and MJ, they're going the other way. Their swing is locked in. They're seeing the ball all the way through, and they're just guiding it to the opposite field. Now, MJ hits the ball harder than Maikel, but Maikel Garcia can hit the ball pretty hard for his size and his stature. And when he struggled this year, you saw a lot of those ground balls to the left side. you saw a lot of bad swings with 2 strikes. And it eventually led the Royals to moving him out of the leadoff spot. And where I'm at right now is thinking that Maikel Garcia will not be this team's leadoff hitter in 2025. I think that he can provide more value for this team, hitting lower in the order, or being a every once in a while player. Maybe that's the wrong terminology to use. Every other day type of player. Matt Quatrero does that with his lineups, right? We saw Adam Frazier in there a lot. We saw a mixing and matching with Massey and Maikel Garcia at second base, more so because Massey was hurt. But to me, I could see Maikel Garcia being a very valuable asset to this team as almost the plug-and-play guy for the infield. If Massey needs a day off at second base, he can play there. If Bobby Witt Jr., though I don't count on it, needs a day off, he can play short. If somebody needs a day off at third, Maikel Garcia can play third. Or maybe Maikel Garcia is the everyday third baseman when we have opening day in 2025. But I do believe he's going to need to hit lower because his player profile, what he does really well is play good defense, and he's a great base runner. Offensively, there's not enough there, but I also want to acknowledge that he's a young hitter. This was his first true full season at the big league level. He was called up in May of 2023, so I guess I can count that as pretty much a full season, and maybe I will for the sake of the argument. I think of what he showed this year is probably what he is, minus some of those catastrophic slumps that he went through. I believe he can be a 250 to 260 hitter. I know he was down in the low 230s, maybe even got into the high 220s by the end of it. But Maikel Garcia is somebody that I believe can get up to the 250, 260 mark. I never will think that he is going to be a high OBP guy, which is what the Royals need from the leadoff position. For years, they had Escobar at the leadoff spot. He was never a high OBP guy. He was an ambush guy. He was a light-hitting shortstop, and everybody loves Alcides Escobar. And Maikel Garcia is related to Alcides Escobar. And he closely resembles a lot of what Escobar did, but he's much better defensively. They have that light-hitting aspect to them. And if you are going to see a lot of pitches, which I think there are good numbers out there to show that Maikel Garcia sees a good amount of pitches, but when he's struggling, he's just not. He's trying to swing first pitch. He's not having a lot of hard contact. And I think he would very much be suited to hit lower in the order, and I think thrive at that part of the order. I think that Maikel Garcia still is a very talented player and somebody that could be a key piece for this team throughout the next handful of years. But the Royals are also looking to upgrade their lineup a little bit. And I think that's where you need to evaluate guys like Maikel Garcia and guys like Michael Massey and say, where do they best thrive in the order? And I would probably put it down toward the bottom. And Maikel Garcia hit ninth in the postseason. He also hit leadoff against lefties. Maybe that's the approach you take. He was phenomenal, in my opinion, in the postseason. He had that spark. He never looked rattled by the environment. I love that type of intensity that he showed. And for that, it gave me a much better ending and a much better grade to his 2024 than I originally was going to give him. I mean, man, you'd be lying at some point in September if you didn't think that maybe Paul DeJong was going to be the answer at third base in the postseason. Paul DeJong never got into a game. And that was because Paul DeJong was really bad in September. And Maikel Garcia gives you that speed. He gives you that glove over at third base. But I think you can maximize that value by having him play a little bit all over. Playing at second, playing at short, playing at third, and getting some guys off their feet, and you feel trustworthy with a guy like him over there. But I think the toughest part about 2024 is he was seen as one of those guys that could move the needle offensively. You knew how good the defense could be. You knew he could be a good base runner. You knew he had that flexibility defensively. And that part of his game with the bat is something that I thought was going to be much better. I think what we saw at the end of 2023 got my hopes up a little bit that he could be a 270 hitter with a 330 OBP. I thought that'd be good enough. And there were times early on in the year he showed that he was a good leadoff hitter, that he could get on base, he could swipe second, and the Royals still value that a lot. But some of those slumps really put this team in a tailspin because he couldn't get on base, and it took away one of his strongest attributes, which is stealing bases. He, by far and away, is the best base stealer on the team. He's not the fastest guy. He's not even the second fastest guy, but he is the best base stealer. He's got the highest base running IQ, has picked it up very well on how to get a great jump off a pitcher, how to get that read on a pitcher. But overall, if I'm combining everything, it has to be a C average season for Maikel Garcia because he just didn't turn the corner in the way I thought he would offensively. I still think there's something there, but I also think it's up to the Royals for giving him a little extra help toward the bottom of the order. When he's got that protection, I think you can see the best version of him. When he's got the defense working for him, he can swipe 35 to 40 bags in a year. You've got a tremendous player there. I mean, you even look at the wins above replacement this year. With as much as he struggled from time to time offensively and for large stretches of the season, he still had a very respectable WAR. And to me, that's something you build around. It's why the Royals kept Kyle Isbell around and still will in 2025, because the defense is so good. You just go, man, if you can get a league average bat, and I've overused that term a lot, but you get a league average bat from Maikel Garcia, he is tremendously valuable to this team and to this lineup. And I think they can get there in 2025, but I would love to see the approach not involve adding that pop, which maybe that means not making him an everyday third baseman. Maybe he plays second one day, then third, then maybe he learns an outfield spot just to give him that extra, that flexibility in the field where he can get in the lineup, 130, 135 times in a season. But being a guy that can hit to all fields, use your legs, use your glove, you can be a tremendously valuable player. And to me, he was valuable to this squad, and he was valuable in the postseason. But as a whole, I got to give it a C. And maybe for some people out there, it's much lower than that, or maybe it's much higher than that. I would love to hear everybody's thoughts in the comment page. But to me, I just think that, you can expect more from a guy like him. He is talented. The organization believes in him. And I still think there are big things to come for Maikel Garcia in 2025. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, do the Royals need to make any changes to their staff? JJ Picollo of Matt Quatrero said that unless there's an opening, everybody's going to be retained for this next season. We'll dive into it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor and our title sponsor today in Gametime. The Royals season has concluded, but football is in full swing here in Kansas City. Whether you're a fan of college football or you're loving the NFL, or maybe you're excited for college basketball to begin next week, head over to Gametime to buy your tickets. You've heard me talk so much about them. It's the app I use when going to buy tickets. I was in San Francisco over the weekend, didn't get back till late last night, but I went to a Stanford game. It was awesome. I went to the Chiefs and the 49ers. It was awesome. All of those tickets bought right on Gametime because it's the best app to use when looking for tickets. I'm also always scouring for concert tickets and comedy shows where I can go to Gametime and make sure I'm taken care of, and we've got a great deal for you. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This was something that was tossed around a little bit, I think, in one of our Mailbag Fridays. And also, I think it came up a time or two in our episodes last week. But the Royals are going to retain their entire coaching staff unless an opening happens. And that even goes up to the front office, I believe. Scott Sharp, the assistant GM to JJ Picollo, he was entertained for the Giants opening for the GM position. Buster Posey, of course, is the president of baseball operations there. But Scott Sharp withdrew his name, so he'll be back in Kansas City. And I think for the rest of this staff, you feel kind of good about where they're at. There are going to be criticisms for the hitting coaches, I think, because of the way the season ended. But I also want to double down with this. Alex Zumwalt is a very bright individual. And I think Keone Duren is a very bright individual. They have a lot of minds in there, and they put a lot into making sure these players are prepared. And I've always had this belief when it comes to hitting coaches and pitching coaches. You are tinkering with some things, and probably this is biased because the Royals pitching staff was phenomenal this year, and we give a lot of credit to Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove and all those guys that were helping the pitching department. They're going to get the praise, right? That they turned around a Cole Reagans, that they helped out some of these guys like an Alec Marsh, like a Brady Singer. They found value in these bullpen guys, and we saw Serpa become a postseason guy for the Royals. We saw Sam Long turn into somebody. And yes, I do believe this pitching staff sits down with guys and, hey, maybe we learn a new pitch here. Chris Bubic, right? We're going to throw the slider a little bit more. Michael Lorenzen comes in. Hey, we want to throw this pitch a little bit more. They absolutely get credit for what they're able to do. When it comes to hitting coaches, I think it's a little bit more difficult because there's not an extra thing you can do to add to your arsenal. It's not like, you get traded somewhere and a hitting coach says, hey, we want to, add power to you. If you're not, you can't just add power to a guy that can't hit for power. They need to bulk up, right? That's something you do in the offseason. You can change the swing a little bit and you can change a stance, but that's what it comes down to, right? You tinker with some things, foot placement, hand placement. You try out different things, right? But a lot of it is going to come down to, is the hitter talented? Can they take that adjustment and use it for the better? And I think a lot of fans used MJ Melendez's struggles, Kyle Isbell's struggles, Maikel Garcia's struggles at times. Hey, Michael Massey, and you blame the hitting coach. When the offense goes through a tailspin, you don't want to blame the players all the time. We need to fire the hitting coach. I think what it comes down to me personally is if there is a good connection between the players and the coaching staff, that's what you need. Because you could bring in a bright mind, a guru, right? And if they don't get along with the players, they're not going to take anything that coach says. I'm not saying that to devalue what Kevin Seitzer could bring to this club, because I believe Kevin Seitzer is a bright mind. Do I know if he would mesh well with the players? I don't know. I truly don't know. Probably would, because he's a very respected guy and he helped Atlanta really turn around that offense, or was one of the guys that helped do that. But to me, I think the players really like Alex Zumwalt and are open to new ideas here and there and like to game plan with him. And I've, always thought that he was somebody that was qualified for a job like this. And I do believe in baseball, it's blown out of proportion a little bit when an offense or a pitching staff struggles. Yes, we can bring up the Cal Eldred situation. He certainly didn't help the staff. It also wasn't a very talented staff, but the Royals weren't getting the best out of anybody. You make that move. You fire that guy. If you're a team, too, that just has a lot of guys that maybe aren't as good or not as talented, a hitting coach isn't going to turn a bunch of guys that are average into superstars or all-stars in the 1 year they have them. And I think the Royals understand that. I think it's probably more so about adding more consistent bats to the lineup. And then, you feel like the offense can really start chugging along. If the Royals were dead last offensively this year, you could probably look into making a move because something's wrong there. But when you're middle of the pack and you're really hot and cold, that to me comes more down to you need more consistency. You need different guys in the lineup that can level it out, where when you are slumping, you're not heavily slumping. And when you are up and down, you just want to get to that middle level of, hey, I don't want to go from scoring 11 runs in game 1 and then being shut out in game 2 and scoring 1 run in game 3. I'd rather it be, if we're going to score 12 runs in 3 games, how about 4 in each, right? Or how about you have something like 7, 4, and 3? I could win you a series right there if your pitching staff is good enough. I like that the Royals are open to the idea of adding certain guys, but it's going to come down to if guys leave for other jobs. I would love for Brian Sweeney to stay around. The good thing is we haven't heard him linked to any other teams out there that are looking to move him to a managerial role, but he is somebody that was great. And I think to a lot of teams and organizations out there, you say, hey, this guy was the pitching coach for a team that went from one of the worst rotations, the second worst rotation in baseball, to having one of the best out there, having the second most quality starts in the American League. But then there's that other side of man, they did overhaul. They revamped the rotation. I remember one time I was in the press conference room and asked Matt Quatrero about the jump that 2023 had made pitching staff wise from 2023 to 2024. And he said, you can't really compare it because these are two different rotations. It's like a completely different team almost. And I can understand that part of it. How can you truly evaluate something or compare and contrast when the entire team is different and there's different guys out there? So I look at this coaching staff and I don't think there has to be a move made. I don't think you fire anybody to bring in Kevin Seitzer. If a role opens up, there's an advisor role, there's a assistant hitting coach, something like that, then yeah, I think you absolutely entertain that idea. But to me, what I look for in coaches is the coachability between player and coach, the willingness to soak up the knowledge they're giving, the trust that you have between player and coach. That's what makes things click. That's when you have guys, start to turn the corner. We've seen that with the pitching staff. You're hoping to see that offensively, and maybe it comes down to adding different bats in the lineup. But if the Royals get out to a bad start in April and the offense is the main reason, then maybe then you could look into it. But right now, I think it's more so about, do the players and coaches mesh well? And can you get more consistent results? That's probably going to be addressed in 2025. If you can see this team even out, they level out, then you made the right move. If they're a bottom three, offense at the end of April, the end of May, then yeah, maybe you do have to look into something like that. But even then, you don't fire a hitting coach, bring in a new one, and all of a sudden the offense gets turned around. I mean, even when Zumwalt took over for Terry Bradshaw, it's a process, right? It's a process, to quote Moneyball there. But to me, I think with this group, the offense is going to level it out when they add more consistent bats. I don't think you're trying to overhaul this lineup by just getting the best version out of Kyle Isbell, MJ Melendez, Maikel Garcia. That's all fine and dandy. That's the best case scenario. But I think the most realistic scenario is adding two bats to this lineup that really even it out for everybody else. So right now I'm going to say no. This staff's not going to have any changes because I don't see anybody leaving for another job. But if they do, then that would be the staff change that you might be able to expect. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's preview a very anticipated World Series between the New York Yankees and the Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor today in FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And I'll look ahead to Friday, game 1 of the World Series between the Dodgers and the Yankees. I'm going to throw a little bit of a wild card in here. I thought about taking the under on Garrett Cole innings pitched for this one, but I'm going to take a wild card with Kike Hernandez. He's been great for the Dodgers in the postseason, has always been great in the postseason. I'm going to take the over on total hits in the game for Kike Hernandez. Hopefully he can get in there and he's not going to be sitting on the sideline, sitting on the bench for this one against the Yankees. So I'll throw a wild card in there for fun for game 1 of the World Series between the Dodgers and the Yankees. Speaking of game 1 and speaking of this series as a whole, I feel like it's the perfect time for me to give my thoughts on what this means for baseball. And yes, I was out of town. I do apologize for being away for so long and not being able to put up an episode until Tuesday night, late Tuesday night for that matter. But now, since I'm here, I can give my thoughts on the series and probably the only thoughts I'll have until it's actually done because this is a Royals podcast. But I do think there's good and bad to it. And maybe that's not the answer you were looking for, but I'll explain myself here. The good is that last year, there was a lot of baseball fans that were let down. If you were not a fan of the Rangers or you were not a fan of the Diamondbacks, you did not like the 2023 World Series because they were two teams that maybe didn't have the biggest superstars, certainly not baseball's biggest superstars. Arizona was on this Cinderella run, and you always felt like they were the underdog, and they were the underdog the entire time. But they had knocked out a great team like the Brewers. They had knocked out a great team like the Phillies. And they got to the World Series, and what happened? They got steamrolled. The Rangers absolutely pounded them, and there was really only one game that was entertaining, and that was game run, the Adolis Garcia walk-off. So the good part about this is one of the most anticipated World Series in a long time. And yeah, it may pain me to say that as a Royals guy, and you got the Yankees there and the Dodgers, but you get Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge, right? You get Yamamoto and Garrett Cole, or you get Jack Flaherty and Carlos Rodon. You get, Juan Soto in this deal. You get, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith, right? The list goes on and on with the talent, the superstar talent, and two fan bases that are starving, in my opinion, to call themselves the best. The Dodgers, of course, won the World Series in 2020. That was a COVID-shortened year. They want to be able to prove it in a full 162-game slate, and in a year where they had all the pressure in the world on them from the start. After they spent all that money, pressure was on. The Yankees, they haven't won a World Series since 2009. So the pressure is on them now, and they know they got to get it done with what Juan Soto's market's going to be coming up in the offseason. So from a baseball standpoint, it is good that you get the viewership like this. You get the American League MVP and likely the National League MVP. And you got two big markets in the Yankees and the Dodgers. I'm going to be glued to the TV watching this because these are two heavy hitters. These are two heavyweights. And yes, it would have been great, maybe if you were just rooting for the American League Central, for Cleveland to pull off that miraculous comeback again and find a way to win in New York. In my opinion, the Dodgers would have beaten up on the Guardians, and we would have gotten kind of the World Series from 2023 2.0. Now this is much more of an even matchup. And no, you don't have the easy team to root for. Probably from the American League side, you're rooting for the Dodgers. Maybe not. I don't want to speak for everybody. And if you're a hater of the Dodgers, you're rooting for the Yankees. You don't feel good about it. Nobody feels good about it. It's rooting for two evils in baseball. So that's the good side to it. The ratings, the viewership, the MVPs playing, two big markets, great venues, Yankee Stadium, Dodger Stadium. That's great for baseball. That's absolutely great for baseball. That's undeniable in my opinion. The bad side to it, which I've seen from a lot of people as well, is the precedent it sets. These are two teams that spent a lot of money, right? And they spent money that a lot of teams just don't have. The Yankees have unlimited money. The Dodgers have unlimited money. And it puts it in an unfair advantage where they go, man, you can afford Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, and you can afford Shohei Ohtani because he, defers his money to the back half of his contract, and you get Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts. I didn't even mention Mookie Betts earlier. I apologize to Mookie and a lot of Mookie Betts fans. Obviously, he is a superstar. He's an MVP guy. They have set this level of we're just in a different category. We're in a different league of what we can spend. And for a lot of the small market teams, it showed in this postseason, hey, you just can't compete against that. The Royals couldn't compete against the Yankees. The Guardians couldn't compete against the Yankees. On the Dodgers side of things, I mean, they handled the Mets. And it's not really a great example because the Mets spent a lot of money as well. My good buddy Joel Penfield, I do want to give credit here. They do great work over at One Royal Way. He, Josh, and Jordan just do phenomenal work. I love watching their shows. But Joel brought up a good point of what this can say for baseball. And this kind of ties back into the good thing about it, too. I don't think that baseball needs a salary cap, or this is from the words of Joel, of course, Joel Penfield. But a salary floor is better, where you get some of these poor owners that cry poor and say, I can't spend that, I can't spend that, when you can, and you force teams to be more competitive. And here's how that changes baseball, in my opinion. You ask these teams like an Oakland, like a Tampa Bay, like even Cleveland or Minnesota that just don't spend a lot of money. You say, hey, you got to spend X amount. And you go out there in this free agency, there's less players, to go to some of those mega teams, right? You can compete and get some good players. It makes it harder for those teams that dominate and run through the postseason. And that's what I think can make baseball better, because some of the teams that cry poor about it, try to recreate Moneyball, they're going to be left in the dust. You can't compete with the Yankees and the Dodgers in the postseason. But I will also say this. Spending money doesn't always mean you're going to be great. Baseball has proven that. Again, the Yankees went 15 years between World Series. They spent a lot of money every single offseason. They gave Garrett Cole a huge contract, right? They've tried to build around Aaron Judge. They tried to build around the teams before. I mean, even the final years of Jeter, having A-Rod there, trying to run out the last little bit of that early 2000s Yankees team and mid 2000s Yankees team, they never could get it done. That was Sabathia, right? Even Mo Rivera's last couple of years, they couldn't get it done, right? The Phillies have spent a lot of money. They lost in the World Series to Houston. Houston isn't a team that they spend money. They don't spend a ton of money, and they've probably been the most successful franchise over the last half decade or so. The Mets spent a lot of money last year, of course, bringing in Lindor and everything and adding pitching talent. They missed the postseason, right? So it's not a linear thing where it's, man, all these mega teams, these superstar teams, they're just always going to be at the top. That's not the case because injuries can happen, right? You can have those things that set you back. Guys don't perform as well. So to me, I agree with Joel. I think there needs to be a salary floor, not a salary cap. You want to incentivize teams to go out there and spend. You have to spend money, better your team, give your team a shot where it's not going to be like this all the time. You know, you want to see those underdog teams make it all the way. And it's not like the Yankees swept everybody out. The Royals gave them a fight. Cleveland gave them a fight. The Dodgers did not have a cakewalk. They were down to their elimination game against the Padres. The Padres spend a lot of money. It hasn't worked out yet in a World Series championship. So to me, I think it's great for viewership. It is frustrating that you have two villainous teams, but hey, that to me, you got MVPs going head to head. You've got two teams and fan bases that are going to be rabid. I think it is fun for baseball. I don't know who I'm going to cheer for. I'd rather just cheer for some great players to excel because that's what you want. You want great, exciting baseball in the postseason, and that's what has been given to us in 2024. And I'm sure we're going to be in for a great series between the Yankees and the Dodgers. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we'll probably have another breakdown of grading out a certain player on this team, and then maybe look a little bit deeper into free agency again and another target that the Royals should be eyeballing. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.